Hey guys, this is Camfree15 back at it with another video for you guys, and I'm back with another Fairy Tale arc review after I recently finished the last arc, coming off the Tamriel Island arc, as well as me watching this arc. We are here to talk about the arc that is in between the Tamriel Island arc and the Grand Magic Games arc. Like I said, we will not be getting the Grand Magic Games arc very, very soon, or not at the point, but very, very soon. And we are here to discuss the anime filler arc, the Key of the Starry Sky arc, which, again, like I said, is an anime only arc. Now, from what I heard, Mashima actually did work on this arc, and the reason why this arc was a thing in the anime was to give the anime some distance from the manga at the time. So they created an arc, and Mashima chipped in and made this arc. So I guess it's up to your interpretation if you want to consider this arc canon. It's filler, but because it's not in the original source material of the manga. But hey, I honestly think, for what it's worth, I honestly think the Key of the Starry Sky arc, after in my second rewatch, compared to my first watch, honestly, I came out of this arc liking this arc a lot more than I previously did at first in my first watch. Now, the video I made about this arc a long, long time ago on my channel, which is already probably deleted, so you can't even see it because I just deleted so you don't get confused with this arc and everything. But I remember trashing this arc completely, saying I didn't like it for some pretty BS reasons, to be honest. I haven't went back and looked at the video or anything, but I know I gave some pretty bad reasons, and I didn't really go into detail with the story here and everything. So yeah, now again, I'm not trying to say that the Key to the Starry Sky arc is, well, perfect by any means. I think in my second rewatch, I think the Key of the Starry Sky arc is actually a fairly solid fairy tale arc. It kind of has that premise of the early arcs of fairy tale, not when you get to the intro, but like around the Arashian Sace types of Edalus type of, terms of plot and story where it takes it there. Which, is fine with me. I thought it was a solid story. It has its occasional problems here and there, with how some characters are utilized and stuff like that. So yeah, but yeah, let's get to this arc. So again, like I said, this is the Key of the Starry Sky arc. This is on anime only. So if you're reading the manga, you are not going to see this arc in the manga. You will have to watch this arc in the anime only. And again, the episodes it covers is episodes 125 to 150. With a little bit of it cutting, with a little bit of the end of the arc, essentially cleaning up the Legion Platoon characters a little bit in episode 151. So if you were just wondering who the hell are these characters, if you just skip this arc completely at the start of 151, that's what those characters are. Personally, I think this arc fits in probably really damn good in the timeline. You could literally make this arc canon. That's the one thing, even though I'm fine with this filler arc and I hate the other one, it doesn't matter what I feel. When we get to that arc, I will hate that arc. They fit pretty nicely in the timeline of the fairy tale time, and essentially of what they do leading up to these bigger arcs and everything. But this arc is obviously centered around Lucy Hartfilia and her family mostly. But yeah, now again, this arc again takes place directly after the Fairy Tale Guild get back from obviously their 7-year hiatus of when they were trapped inside the fairy sphere and they didn't age or grow one bit. You get a few filler episodes leading up to this filler arc. Mostly the main thing, if you want to take out of those episodes, is the Butt Jiggle Gang, because they show up later in this arc. So anyways, one, you see that to start off this arc, you see that churches are being destroyed by this teddy bear, this bear with a jackpot type of thing going on and everything. So that's kind of how the arc opens up. Now we cut over to the Fairy Tale Guild, and Lucy, the thing that ties up with this whole arc is the fact of Lucy's um, father's death that I don't believe I mentioned the Tenor Island arc at the end of the Tenor Island arc video. So essentially, once Lucy kind of gets settled back into Fiore, or not Fiore, Magnolia and everything, when she can't get back into her apartment because she has yet to pay all the fees and everything. So what happens is, you know, after just seeing how the guild's reaction to Kana and Gildarts being father and daughter, it kind of gets Lucy to think like, hey, you know, maybe I should go see my father, especially even though I don't like him. I was gone for 7 years, so I bet he would be at least happy to see me, see that I'm okay. So he goes over to she goes over along with Natsu to her father's guild, and one of the I guess you can say attendants at the desk are like, oh, you're looking for Jude Arthilia? Oh, and you're Lucy Arthilia? I'm sorry to say this, but your father died a month ago. And it's kind of a very emotional thing. You know, you have this scene where they're walking back to Magnolia, and you have these, I guess, these two girls trying to throw out like the whole fact, like, I hate my old man. He's freaking terrible and stuff like that. Natsu kind of sticks up because he knows what Lucy's going through. And Lucy kind of gives a speech of saying, like, you know, even though my father's dead, I'm like, I feel bad, but I'm like, should I be crying? Like, does this make me bad if I'm not crying about it? And Natsu's like, well, and it's one of probably Natsu's best lines he said in the entire series. And he's like, well, just because you're crying doesn't mean you don't like hate him or you don't miss him or anything. You still feel, obviously you still feel sad and you still feel bad. It's just people cope with death completely different ways. And yes, listen, in the case of Lucy and a relationship with her father, you could see her like not crying over his death. She obviously she's still kind of heartbroken and sad over the death, but she was infected. Now you get to the part where it gets freaking teary-eyed, tear jerker crying scene is when they get back to Magnolia. Lucy's landlord finds Lucy, brings her back to her apartment, says, you can live back up in your apartment again. You're thinking, oh, this is probably, you know, some sort of you feeling generous, her feeling generous of the fact, our hero feeling sorry for Lucy, the fact that she lost her father and everything. But now we find out that Lucy's father left all these presents for Lucy the past 7 years, waiting for her to return. And in the meantime, he also paid off all the 7 years of her rent. And she reads the letter sent from Jude Arphilia, and that's when you get the very emotional scene. You get the entire revelation and everything. And to be honest, it's a scene that can make you cry, like legit. It's a scene that can make you cry. Like, you know, we know from the dad character, from Jude Hartvillia, that we knew that this is a guy that seemingly didn't look like he cared one bit for his daughter, Lucy. You know, that one passing when she was a kid, forgetting that it was her birthday. The fact that she forced the whole dark guild to attack her new guild friends just to forcibly go back home so she can get married to some other rich dude. And then even when he loses all his money and his estates, from his whole thing, he comes back, asks Lucy for some money and stuff like that. You know, you think, what more low could this guy get to, and stuff like that. And the fact that the past 7 years, in a way, he kind of made up all the mistakes he wronged Lucy in the past by doing probably a good thing out of a parent's heart. Because at the end of the day, a parent's always supposed, despite how old your children are, you know, you're always supposed to look after your children. Even if your children are 50 and you're 80, you're still supposed to look after them because that's your kid, and stuff like that. And it was very emotional. It was definitely a very tear-jerking scene and stuff like that. So yeah, but the reason why this ties into the arc so much is because a few days later after that incident, we see the girl by the name of Michelle Lobster come to Fairy Tale looking for Lucy. And she goes on to say that she's a distant relative of the Hartfilia family, and she says that she managed to see her dad, leading up to the days as before he passed away. And Michelle's like, listen, your father left this as a memento to you and everything. And we see that there's this object wrapped in cloth, and when they unwrap it, it ends up becoming this mechanical gear, and stuff like that. So yeah, which is very interesting. Now we see a few episodes in this arc where Michelle is working alongside the fairy tale guild, and she essentially becomes a part of the guild, literally, and stuff like that. Now, Lockout actually tells Lucky and Gildarts, hey, I need you to do a favor. I need you to look into the past of Michelle Lobster. Well, in the past of Michelle Lobster, to make sure she can be trusted, because we don't want to get ourselves into some trouble where she's playing Lucy for a fool and everything. Now, it gets to the point when Michelle puts down a request herself for Fairy Tale to find out the mystery of the clock hand and the memento that Lucy's father left behind, and why did Lucy's father leave this entrusted to Lucy. Then we get the many starts of Carla's premonitions again, where she just refuses to tell anybody in the guild. Yes, even though they're not eye-opening and you probably can't figure out what the meaning behind those premonitions are, you could do your favor and tell your guildmates that, oh, guess what? I have this premonition, and something bad seems like it's happening. Yep. Just doesn't want to tell. I told you, it's the thing with Carla's character. She has these premonitions, doesn't tell anybody. By the time you get to the end of the arc, that's when she's like, oh yeah, this is what happened. And by then it's already too late. Anyways, moving on. Moving on. We see the gear and the clock hand start glowing and floating, and then there are words that can't be translated because Freed and Levy aren't there. But Makarov reads and he kind of tells them like, I think you guys probably for the best, for the best thing, I think you guys should probably leave this alone and just act like you're not seeing nothing. But Lucy is like, no, I need to solve the mystery of my dear old father and stuff like that, because now I've reneged fate, or reneged passion, in trying to see what my father's dying wish was to let me solve and everything. So yeah, now at Lucy's house, Levy manages, after she comes back from her job, she manages to decipher the writing on on the clock hand, and she essentially informs that the script is ancient Potamilian, and she reads and it says that time is etched and then chaos descends. Now Lucy remembers the phrase, and she retrieves a book on the shelf, and reading out this story about this strange destiny of a clock that had been passed on for centuries. They find out that the obviously gear is actually the hand of a large clock, which we later find out is the infinity clock. We kind of get again more fillerness in sort of this arc. After the festival pertaining to the Dragon Slayers, because in this arc you have Natsu and Gajo trying to take on Loxus. Gajo kind of runs away because he sees that Loxus easily destroys Natsu pretty easily. So at this point in time, Loxus is still stronger than Natsu. Essentially, we see Fairy Tail get attacked by 3 individuals who we find out and we see, which is a nice little plot twist they do here, is that they are the Earthland versions of the Edelus Royal Guard, which are Coco, Sugar Boy, and Hughes. Coco and Sugar Boy, they look, honest to God, exactly identical to their Edelus selves. The only difference is Sugar Boy has more of an Elvis Presley look compared to his armored look in Edelus. And the only difference about Hughes is, well, Hughes literally gender swapped, or is a gender swapped character in Earthland. In Edelus, we know that Hughes was a boy. Here, Hughes is a chick, and she goes by the name of Mary Hughes. So, yeah. Now they all say, look, they're here for Lucy, and essentially the reason why they're here for Lucy is to get a hold of the clock hand and everything. But obviously, Fairy Tail's like, you can't have Lucy, so they fight. to protect Lucy, but they all utterly get destroyed with utter ease, which is just shocking. Again, the one thing I do like the fact that the fairy tale characters do get to pretty much owned for a majority of this arc, really till the final climax, is the fact that most of these wizards have like 7 years up on really the main cast of characters and stuff like that. So I like that fact because it's like, well, technically they're like 7 years weaker than most of these characters here. But yeah. So what happens next up is eventually Lucy and Michelle get away and kind of retreat for a bit because everybody pretends to be, well, they say, well, I'm Lucy, no, I'm Lucy, and it confuses all the Legion platoon members and everything, and stuff like that. So most fights end up getting transported to this forest. Lucy ends up running into Hughes, Wendy, and Carla and Lily end up, so I guess you can say, having an encounter with Coco. And then Natsu has a fight with Sugar Boy, where again most of those matchups is just one-sided and everything. Now, but then we see this man on an octopus show up, which is the Earthland version of Byro, who is completely different from his Atlas self. He's not a scrawny old man. He's essentially still a middle-aged old man, but he's taller and he actually looks like a threat, which he is a threat this entire arc. Now we coming over to the Hughes fight with Lucy and Michelle. Hughes makes Michelle and Lucy go off a cliff. Ari manages to save them, but then Hughes starts to fight Lucy, or starts to fight them, and Lucy realizes that celestial spirits are not affected by Hughes' magic because Hughes' magic can affect only living things. But the thing is, it doesn't really help because eventually gets to the point where Lucy gets controlled by Hughes, and Hughes gets handed over, or hands over the and Hughes gets the Infinity Clock by Lucy managing to hand over the clock hand and everything. Byro then ends up fighting Gildarts. The thing we know about Byro is he has magic canceling type of magic, which essentially cancels out any spell a wizard does against him, and stuff like that. Urza ends up showing up after she went on some sort of quest with Gray, and stuff like that. So yeah, now after getting the clock hand, essentially the Legion platoon get out of there because, hey, they got what they wanted. Carla then has another premonition. Yeah. Anyways, we actually cut over to Lohar and the Magic Council, and they're trying to stop another one of the churches from being blown up, but again, they fail to do that, and we see the same bear with the slot machine, who did it, and they escape. Now, in this place in the sky called Zentopia, the Archbishop talks to his subordinates about his nightmares and what they could signify, essentially telling them that the anniversary event is approaching, and he requests that they summon the cardinals in case something happens. Anyways, to get some more answers about, obviously, the clock hand, Natsu and the others go to Lucy's old family mansions that's been abandoned. We kind of get a nice, interesting little plot point of the fact that when Lucy has the money, she says when Lucy gets the right amount of money, she'll more than likely buy her old house back, which I think is pretty cool. It definitely could be a case where, hey, maybe not in the future. Now, again, like I said, this is just filler, so who knows if Lucy feels like this in the main continuity. It would make sense that she would probably, yeah, I would like the fact that it would make sense that she would buy her old mansion back because technically it's her property that's there. We explained like nobody wants to buy it because it's just abandoned and nobody wants to buy it. So it would make sense if Lucy buys it. Be a nice new house for her and Natsu to live up into. But I just have I have a feeling like Natsu and Lucy, whenever they get together, are just gonna live in that nice tiny apartment because, hey, why? But who knows? Maybe they just might end up moving over to Natsu's house when I guess they end up getting hooked up together. So we'll just have to see, and stuff like that. Which we do get a Nalu moment here in this arc as well at the end and stuff like that. Now, eventually, they end up finding a book from Jude that ends up being empty. But Lucy Celeste's spirit named Crux tells them that through the book, it has no magic or invisible ink, which could potentially hide some text, and they could use it to find the title to solve the riddle. Now they're trying to decipher it. Eventually, Carla spots the word myth within the letters, and they eventually find the words dual and great. Lucy then figures out that these words are connected to a book called The Two Great Myths, which leads to a book called Life of the Clockwork. And it's a book she owns. She tells him that the other myth is another book called The Ski of the Starry Heavens, which is, I guess, somewhat of the title of this arc, but different. It's called Key of the Starry Sky. So something like that. Anyways, as they're trying to look for the book, we see another X-Seed in the storyline appear, and he goes by the name of Samuel. He works for Zentopia. And he comes with another acquaintance named Dan to take the book. Now, Dan fights the others, but fairly easily defeats Natsu and the others. He also falls for Lucy in the scene. And he also turns Natsu small thanks to the magic on his spear. Now, they try to trick Samuel with the book by fooling him that Happy took the book, but in reality, they were hiding under Michelle's dress. So they take it, they leave, and the Legion platoon has another theme, stuff like that. But what happens next up is Lucy then later explains that the Key of the Starry Heavens, after getting a new book or something like that, I believe, is about a girl who is told that she can become happy if she can gather 6 special keys. So she goes off to collect them. But in the end, this results in people around her becoming unhappy, and everyone deducts that the keys actually refer to the clock parts. And stuff like that. And let me just say this. Literally, I put in my notes, I'm like, these keys found result in people becoming unhappy. By the time you get to the time it's there when they reveal, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to that. So eventually, we end up splitting. This is like the one of 3 times the group, like the Fairy Tale gang, split into different groups. We have a group of Lily, Gagio, Levy, Jet, and Troy, Leon, Gray, and Juvia, Kana, Carla, and Wendy, Urza, Kana, Carla, Wendy, and Urza, and then Lucy, Michelle, Happy, and Romeo and Natsu. Speaking of Romeo is somewhat of a, I guess, integral character in this arc. We get no backstory to him or anything, but we see a much older Romeo who knows fire. I'm guessing fire make magic or something like that. And if I were to tell you they get the most out of Romeo in one filler arc, yeah, that's it. And then after that, Romeo's just kind of your typical fodder side fairy tale character, which it's kind of listen, if you want my thoughts on this real quick, my thoughts on Romeo is the fact that, okay, I think he's a cool character, but it's kind of weird how in the build up to Fairy Tale coming back, they make it seem like he's going to be an important integral character joining, I guess, the side cast of the main cast. You know, and they made him look so important, but after this filler arc, they don't do much. Like, they literally get the most out of him. He literally, when I say Romeo does the most in a filler arc compared to any main continuity arc in the series, that's kind of sad. Two, also from the standpoint, since it was near the time when Majima liked to ship characters. I feel like if Romeo was more of an important character, they could have definitely shipped him with Wendy. It would have made sense. They could have did that. They could have did a Wendy x Romeo ship. Only thing is, Wendy would have probably been more of the dominant type of person in the relationship. But who knows? Maybe they could have made Romeo the whole thing and made it have a scene where maybe Wendy falls for Romeo in some case. But no, they never went that direction because in some case they have, I guess, Wendy and eventually a girl in the series later on in the next arc named Shelia have some sort of relationship where they're friends, but at the same time, it's like friends that I guess take the relationship a little too far, but they're just mostly friends. But honestly, if you would go back, honestly, I would probably make Romeo a little bit more relevant a character. He doesn't do much of anything because he wouldn't be able to change the fabric of the team, of the story really much. But I would have liked it, especially from the standpoint we're just shipping characters left and right. If it was me, he's definitely being shipped up with Wendy. Although I would see Wendy, in the future of a fairy tale guild, definitely I guess being a single character unless Mashima ever decided to hook her up with Mest when she gets to the appropriate age, which we'll get to Mest real soon in this arc, and stuff like that. So yeah, now Lucy, she then ponders over what the chaos can mean, until we see these four archaeologists asking them if they're a member of fairy tales. And essentially, they're these people who are made up of the archaeological society members, and they introduce themselves. They ask Lucy's group whether they're looking for the clock parts, and Lucy asks them for the source of the information. Now, Michelle, she assumes that there could potentially be a spy in the guild, which is further hinting the fact that her potential turn is happening. Because at the time, we see all the other members go around, and we find out that it seems like the clock parts information has gotten out, so that's why Michelle makes that point, and stuff like that. Because Michelle also says because Michelle's like, it wouldn't make much sense for all this information to come out because I don't think the Zentopia church officials would not let this information leak out and everything. Now the archaeologists tell Lucy and others, I think you guys probably should not do this, and you should probably just go back home and do your thing. But Lucy is like, no, I have to do this for my father, and stuff like that because he left. He essentially left me for a puzzle to solve, and I need to find out what my father's trying to tell me. So they're like, okay, fine. They also help Natsu turn back to his normal self as well. Now Gray's group, they end up finding these ruins. They end up fighting Sugar Boy. They end up winning Sugar Boy, and that's kind of it. Yeah, nothing much. They get a clock piece. Natsu's group ends up in a desert tomb called the Sacred Graveyard. But when they look further into the graveyard, they run into Dan and Coco. Natsu ends up having a number of fights with Dan, while Coco and Lucy end up falling in a pit, and essentially, you get the same type of reconnection that they had from the Atlas. I'll talk about the Legion platoon members and my thoughts after I do this arc review. So, yeah. Now, Urza's group, they get to the Magic Library, but they're confronted by the Butt Jiggle Gang. Like I said, if you don't know who the Butt Jiggle Gang are, they were like in a filler episode where they essentially got on the nerves of Wendy and stuff like that. You get some funny comedy because they call Wendy their goddess because Wendy told them to do this stuff. It gave Carla some traumatic experience or something like that. Funny enough and everything. They're trying to steal the clock piece as well. Eventually, Kana finds it, and Urza, after kind of getting embarrassed by them, defeats them with utter ease and stuff like that. Now, Gajo's group is confronted by Samuel. So while Gajiel and Levy and the other Jen and Troy are getting obviously the clock piece and also obviously trying to stop the Guardian, Lily fights Samuel. Now Samuel's like, my tactical fighting, my thinking will help me win this fight, but it really doesn't, and stuff like that. Now Mary Jane's group, they find the next clock piece, which is confronted, and they're confronted by Hughes. Hughes manages to bring out Mira Jane's basic Satan soul. But then we find out that Mira Jane has actually another takeover called Demon Halphus. It gets to the point where Hughes then fuses with Mira Jane's Satan soul, and we get a fight between Mira Jane and Hughes, but then Hughes is fairly easily defeated. Now, back at the tomb, Byro shows up, and Natsu starts fighting his octopus. And in the fight, Lucy and Natsu are forced to save Coco and Dan because, well, Byro almost yells at his or is almost kills his own allies for, well, I guess not not doing the things that they're supposed to be following, the objectives that they're supposed to be following. Which Happy does give a pretty epic speech saying like, you can't determine like who lives or dies and stuff like that, and who's your friends and who's not your friends and stuff like that. It was a nice it was a nice talking point, another good Happy moment and stuff like that. Sometimes Happy can have some of the best scenes in the show. So yeah, I'm at everything now. That I do like the fact that they do say that and everything. Now, Byro says that the Legion's objectives is saying that the parts of the clock go together and make the infinity clock, and that it should happen and the world will end. He also states that Zentopia's church archbishop has ordered the Legion platoon to collect all the pieces to prevent this from happening. And essentially that's when it kind of, and essentially it's to the way where they're trying to prevent a war from happening, but obviously it doesn't. Now, back at the guild, Kinana collapses and her arms start going purple and her eyes start turning into like these cat eyes, snake like eyes. And essentially she's claiming that she can hear everything and stuff like that, but she faints before revealing anything. Now, the thing is, Samuel brings to light that the Exceeds perceive, because he's talking now. Samuel, he's kind of following Lily and his group, and he talks to Lily and he's saying that Exceeds perceive time differently to humans, and due to this, there was something in the Key of the Starry Heavens book that leapt out to him, and he moves on to explain. And essentially, we see that Biska and Alzak's daughter, Oska, essentially hates the book, and we later find out why she hates the book. And essentially, we see that the Zentopia Archbishop sets out candles in preparation for "quote unquote" the end. Now, we also find out that Kinana was a snake at some point in the past 7 years and cannot remember anything in the past. All she can hear is this voice in her head and stuff like that. Again, like I said earlier, Happy makes the whole argument with Byro talking about the importance of duty over the lives of friends, and essentially both of them are neither willing to admit they were wrong and everything. Now, at Zentopia, hundreds of priests are gathering and praying, and many wonder whether or not they should replace the archbishop. However, there's this cardinal by the name of Lapointe who blasts the idea, saying that they must have faith, that he would look after the archbishop, adding that he would only be allowed to, he'd be the only person that'd be able to speak to him, and stuff like that. Again, it's looking again after the whole Happy discussion, with Byro. Byro's super pissed off of what Happy says. So Byro looks like he's gonna do this move that's gonna kill our fairy tale members, but Coco gets in the way, kicks it away, and it kind of gets it to where Coco turns on the Legion, just like how she did with her Edalus counterpart, turning on the people there and everything. And it looks like Byro's going to kill Coco, but that's when the other fairy tale members come in to stop Byro. And it's looking like we're going to get an entire fairy tale team up against Byro. But then that's when we get a plot twist. One of the, I want to say one of the few plot twists in this arc of the fact that, well, like we saw the old members of Atlas in their Earthland forms, we see the Arachon Seis return, and they are called the Neo-Arachon Seis. Brain calls himself, Midnight calls himself Brain the Second. Also, Aragorn is also in the group, as well as this new character named Jackpot. Now, the Arachon Seis, again, I'll explain more in depth about my thoughts on the Arachon Seis in this arc after I'm finished talking about this arc, but I will say this. I like how the Arachon Seis are handled in this arc compared to the original arc they were in, which, funny enough, is a canonical arc. This was strictly filler, and somehow a filler arc decided to take something from the canon of Fairy Tail and actually make it so much better than they did in the original arc. Because let me just say this before, and again, I'll talk more, but the thing I like about the Arachon Seis, mostly the older character of the Arachon Seis compared to the original arc, is In this arc, they give the Irrational 6 characters much more character depth, much more development than they ever got in the original arc. In the original arc, they had some development as characters, mostly from the standpoint of that they were at the Tower of Heaven. But we actually get some, good reasonings of what they did over the 7-year time skip of essentially them sacrificing some part of themselves to become stronger because they have some sort of ideological mind that in order to become stronger, we need to give up something of ourselves up in it. And we see that in each one of their battles and stuff like that. So yeah, but essentially the Legion platoon and Fairy Tail are all easily destroyed by the Irrational 6. The Irrational 6 takes the clock, and we also find out another plot twist here is the fact that the Irrational 6 were kind of pulling the entire strings from the entire time. The fact that they forced the Legion platoon to eventually, well, you can say, make everybody collectively get the Infinity Clock and combine it together. Stuff like that. So, yeah. Now, Blue Pegasus, thanks to Ichia, managed to save Fairy Tail from almost being essentially buried underground and stuff like that. So, yeah. Now, at the Magic Council, news breaks about the Irrational 6 being out, and Lahar then presents himself before the council, and he reveals that not only the Irrational 6 members are back, they also got former Eisenwald member Aragorn, like I said earlier, supported by the fact that they have also broken out of prison, but also that a Zentopia church priest was regularly sent. And also Lahar finds out that there was a Zentopia church priest that visited SACE members essentially regularly and stuff like that. So Lahar's going to go find some surveillance lacrima to essentially be able to, well, guess what? Find out if he's let them free. Now, Grand Doma instructs Lahar to find any recordings of the Irrational 6 and how they broke out, and find out. And also, too, Lahar's like, I'm also going to pay the Zentopia Church a visit to see Cardinal Lapointe and everything. The thing is, after the aftermath of this whole thing, they're in the Pegasus Guild. Lucy goes to visit this nearby ruins. It's, I think, the same ruins where Karen was talking to Loki, begging Loki to go back with her, and she finds Michelle there. Now, Michelle tells Lucy that she blames herself for everything that's happened and that she never realized the horrors of what the clock pieces could bring. And Lucy says it's not her fault, and they both didn't know what could happen. And after consoling Michelle a bit, Lucy then remembers to reread the book. And we also kind of combine this along with Asuka, and Asuka's like, I don't like this book. And we kind of get the plot twist here of the fact that, well, guess what? Fairy Tail was doing the complete opposite of what the book entails them to do. Essentially, the whole thing is, essentially the whole, I guess you can say, thing is what Lucy and the other Fairy Tail members were supposed to do is they were not supposed to combine and find the pieces and bring the clock pieces together. They were supposed to keep the clock pieces away from each other, and they were supposed to keep them separated, essentially hidden. And let me just say this. So almost everybody in Fairy Tail who's in on this planet are like around their teenage years, their early 20s, early to mid 20s. And a 5 to 6 year old little girl finds out, oh, this isn't right. This makes absolutely no sense, and stuff like that. And I'm like, how does a little kid find this out as she's reading the book on her first reread? But Lucy, you're dang near, I don't know how old she's at this point in the story, but she's got to be like her early 20s at least. And I'm like, Lucy, you managed to go over the book and not see that, well, guess what? I'm not supposed to combine the pieces. I'm supposed to keep them apart. And it's like, really? A little kid figured that out. That's why I'm wondering why today in today's society we dumb down our cartoon shows thinking that kids aren't going to figure out. Look, people, kids are smarter than they look. So credit to Asuka. She's a smart little girl and everything. So yeah. Which again, this whole thing kind of pisses off Lucy because she's like, I fell for this. I made a great mistake. Now the Irrational States members have it, and we could have been doing the opposite than doing this. Hey, Makarov did say at the start of the arc. I think we should and it's funny too, not only those archaeologists, but even Makarov's like, I don't think you guys should meddle with this. And so they're essentially hinting at the fact, I think you guys should just leave this well enough alone. So yeah, now at the Zentopia church, all the Legion platoon members return safely. Now, Byro requests to speak to the Archbishop, but Lapointe is like, no, you can't do that. Only I can do that. And Byro tells him, but the Arashi say still the infinity clock and everything. And Lapointe is like, I already know about that. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with it. And essentially, what happens is Lapointe gives them a new mission, as well as giving them a new member in their team who we'll get into later. Coco's also imprisoned. Coco's also imprisoned for essentially betrayal to what the teachings of Zentopia are and everything. So yeah, and she's gonna be punished. Coco says that she's gonna already accept it and she has no regrets. Eventually, we see that the Infinity Clock sends a dark chime throughout all of Fiore, and the fairy tale mage, the fairy tale wizards hear it and stuff like that. Now, the reborn Arashi and Sace, they eventually place essentially, I guess, a link, an anti-link to the Infinity Clock, and they discuss about completing the device and destroying also the rest of the churches. And we see that that's what they start to do. All the Irrational States members destroy some of the churches, with the exception of Brain the Second. And Cobra kind of dismisses it, saying that they can't waste time. But that's when the group splits up. They start destroying stuff like that. We also see that Cobra has somewhat of a new magic, the sound magic, and Angel has this concealment magic. Well, she has like this life magic or something like that, which we'll get into later. So yeah. Now Cobra for most of this arc is like, I keep hearing her voice and I need to hear her and stuff like that. Now Kinana wakes up and she heads in the main hall. Everybody's like, what are you doing? She grabs this fork and she starts engraving some letters on it, and stuff like that. And just Kinana's just not listening to what anybody's saying. Anyways, the Legion platoon are called by Lapointe again, and they essentially are told that they're going to get a new members, and they see that their new member is Gutman, and he talks using telepathy. Anyways, Lapointe actually meets up with Lahar, and he apologizes for being late. He was taking care of something. Lahar asked to see if there's if he has something to talk about him seeing the Irrational Safe, that it could have obviously ties to the church and everything. But Lapointe's like, stop trying to blame us. It's not our fault. You have your own issues that you let these prisoners escape. So not my problem. Everything. And it kind of gives Lahar like, there's something this guy's kind of hiding. So that's when he comes up with something. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna go call a friend for help. And stuff like that. Now, when Levy looks at what Kinana wrote, Levy says that the figures are ancient Punamilian, and it roughly translates to figures to say that Will Neville was a celestial spirit mage and had mastered them. Freed then continues what Levy said, saying that Neville had many disciples, but after he died, the disciples' whereabouts became unknown. Lucy, they do some research into Will Neville and his backstory, and we find out that he used to be a cardinal in the Zentopia church. And however, she notices that there is nothing written about any of his disciples about his magic. Now, Michelle says that the key to the starry heavens was written by a former member of the church, and that Jude used the book to give the message to Lucy. Eventually, that's when also too we also find out that Will Neville is also the author of the book and everything, as well. So what happens is, in order to stop the Irrational Sace from forming the obviously the Infinity Clock. Essentially, they're trying to stop them. So kind of makes a fairy tale team that doesn't end up going well because each of the teams, don't work well together. And it was thanks to kind of being a little bit exhausted and tired that led to the case. So the teams are Lucy, Michelle, Natsu, and Elfman, Wendy and Bixlow, Freed and Gray, Gajel and Juvia, Max, Urza and Evergreen, Happy, Carla, and Lily. Now we see the Says over time start to join churches with these celestial spirit wizards who are descendants of the followers of Will Neville to break the seals of the Infinity Clock, their anti-link seals. Now Lahar goes to find Doran Bolt. If you remember Doran Bolt, he was the guy who infiltrated Fairy Tale 7 years ago on the Tenril Island arc, and stuff like that. Now he goes by the name of Mess now, which was his given name from Fairy Tale back then. And essentially we see he's kind of a wreck. He's kind of like just depressed and just a drunkard because he blames himself for what happened to Fairy Tale, mostly Wendy, those 7 years ago. Now my only question is, when it word have gotten out that the Fairy Tale wizards that were lost on Tenril Island are back, so he should feel fine. He doesn't see Wendy, I believe, till the Grand Magic Games arc, which makes no sense. Also, I don't understand why Lahar didn't tell him, like, hey, those Fairy Tale wizards are back now and everything. I do like the fact that, well, I'll get into it in a second, but as I was saying about, I guess, Wendy's potential, who she could hook up in the past. Only reason why I'm throwing Mest out there is because for some odd reason they have it to where Mest is like into lollies essentially, which is really weird and really creepy. But this is kind of where it starts the whole thing of the fact of he has some sort of feelings or he cares about Wendy because he blames himself for what happened to her and he feels like he abandoned her, and stuff like that. So yeah. Anyways, Lucy, Nasu, and Elfman are fighting Jackpot, which is the bear's name. Wendy and Bixlow fight Aragorn, who seems to have forgotten all his memories, power, but thanks to Wendy using a healing Sky Dragon Roar, manages to get his memories back, and stuff like that. And Bixlow sensed an evil presence leaving his body, clearly showing that he was being used. And kind of his sacrifice was the fact that in order to get stronger, he essentially forgot everything about himself. So yeah, now Lily, Carla, and Happy run to Samuel again, and he asked and Samuel says the situation is more complicated than he thought, and he knows that Carla had some premonitions, and he feels like Zentopia is being manipulated. Now Gildarts and Loki get to the destination that they were supposed to get to. They find some church officials who are later revealed to be essentially dirt, just dummies, and they also find the real Michelle, who's in a comatose state. Now, Lahar and Mest find one of the celestial wizards named Kajita, who this girl reminds Mest of Wendy, and it essentially inspires him to say, like, this is my second chance at making things right. I want to protect you because you look like Wendy. I mean, you get a funny comedic scene where he's like, you remind me of this girl and everything, and he kind of looks at her chest area, and she's like, what the hell are you doing, man? Also, she has her own little plume that's green. So there are different types of celestial spirit plumes, just different colors, and stuff like that. So yeah. Now, Gray, Freed, and Dan fight Angel, but they can't stop her from killing one of the people with the Anti-League. And you just see where all the other Araxxon Safe members are killing the people that are holding the Anti-League that contain the obviously that are holding the Infinity Clock in place and everything. Now Racer tries to attack Kajita, but Mest gets involved, tries to fight him back. He gets beat, but when Racer comes back, he almost kills her, but Mest gets in the way, and something happens where the thing is, even though Mest protects her, the Anti-League of Kajita is essentially erased. But the only thing is Kajita isn't dead, and she's still alive. The only cost is she lost essentially her magic power. So you see her celestial spirit, her plume go away, and stuff like that. So that's the good thing that she's alive. And essentially because of this gets Mest to be like, I can do this. And he takes up the name Doran Bolt yet again, and he's back to his old self again. Now, Samuel reveals that they departed from the Zentopia church, um, and that Cardinal Lapointe gave the Legion platoon individual missions. He's also worried about Gutman, and also he tells them that Coco has been imprisoned as a traitor. Speaking of Gutman, Gagel and Juvia end up fighting Gutman, who were told by Lapointe to destroy one of the churches. And you see Hughes like, this makes no sense. Why would we be doing this? So you get a fight between Gagel and Juvia. It's a tough fight. He essentially, and Gutman uses rupture magic, which whatever magic power you have inside of you, he can just use it as a way to make you blow up or go boom. So what happens is eventually Gagel was kind of stalling for time. Juvia does a water lock and they defeat Gutman and stuff like that. Eventually, after midnight, eventually breaks the last anti-link skill because he was in Magnolia and he defeats Alzak and Biska. He essentially breaks the last anti-link, which reveals the infinity clock, and it shows itself in the form of a mechanicalized fish. Also, in the meantime, too, leading up to this whole battle, we cut over to Natsu's group, and obviously the thing is, we're like, but there's another member of the Sace, because that's what Jackpot says, who was later revealed to be that one Stick who was brain Stick from the Russian Sace arc. And that's when we find out that Michelle is actually a member of the Irrational Sace, and she is known as Imitatia. It's a really emotional scene of the turn because you have Lucy pleading like, please don't tell me you're like this. And, she's like, I'm sorry, big sister, but I got to do what I got to do. Now, this is kind of one of my problems with the arc. Now, the Michelle plot twist turn, which is, again, like I said, another plot twist. Also, too, another plot twist is she essentially tells Byro, listen, you're going to capture Lucy and bring her to me. And she has this little item which tells them to do that. But the Michelle turn, I like the turn was emotional. After the turn was emotional. The leading up to the turn wasn't the best. And what I mean by it, they do it to where they give the typical look. They focus on a character that's supposed to turn on our heroes, on the good guys, and they give the close-up looks where the character looks unsure, and that's what they did time and time again. Where leading up to the turn, they show Michelle's face, and she looks like, I don't want to do something that I'm going to regret, but I'm going to have to do it. And it's like, if you didn't show that, it would be so much better of a turn. It would not catch it coming. I hate when animes or any type of genre of a show with betrayal does that, and they do a close-up face of a character looking unsure, because the first thing that pops in your head is like, they're going to turn on shit, and it usually ends up being the case. So what happens is she knocks out Imitatia, knocks out Lucy. They also knock out Natsu. They take them captive. Elfman tells everybody what's going on and everything and stuff like that. So yeah. Now again, back at the guild, we see the archaeologist guy show up along with his group, and his name Jean Luec, and he gives him the details of the clock. He also reveals that he's Neville's great grandson, and he goes on to say that he was on good terms with Lucy's father, and the fact that he dedicated his life to make sure that the infinity clock stays sealed away. He says that a while back he received word about the hand of the infinity clock, and it's been undiscovered during excavation, and he found out that Jude Harfili had this time. So we talked to him, and he made sure to wrap the hand in this magic cloth to seal its magic and everything. And also he had Jude promise to find a place to keep the hand sealed away forever. Hold on a quick. Okay, back from my quick little break. Anyways, so what happened? So what happened is essentially because of this, Jude, before his death, essentially wanted Lucy, gave obviously the clock hand to Lucy, so Lucy was able to eventually keep it hidden and keep it sealed away and everything for good. She is just, well, he's dead, so he couldn't really tell her that and everything. So the thing is, the guild asks how dangerous the infinity clock is, and Jean-Luc replies that the clock, when the clock activates, the clock activates this thing called real nightmare, which is something that controls people's perception of time, distorting one's memories, and leading to their consciousness breaking down, which in turn makes the person lose all sense of self. So then he gives obviously a request from Fairy Tale, and he asks him to stop the clock from activating. He also gives Urza this hammer that will keep evil at bay. Midnight ends up telling Lucy that she'll be the clock, and when she becomes one with it, she'll be asleep for 100 years, essentially like in the same comatose state she was in the fairy sphere and everything. The only difference is 7 years compared to 100 years. Well, all your friends will be dead in 100 years. So, yeah. Anyways, back at the Magic Council, Lahar sees a surveillance lacrima and from the guard. My goodness. And we see that the person who was responsible for freeing the Ration Safe members was actually Cardinal Lapointe. And we find out that Cardinal Lapointe plot twist, which we already kind of knew coming the way he was giving off his vibe, is actually working alongside the Ration Safe. Cutting over to Natsu. Natsu's in this cage, but he managed to escape thanks to the Butt Jiggle gang. Eventually, they bring Coco to help, and she joins to help in the fight. On the way to Zentopia, the Christina gets attacked by Razor. Mira Jane ends up fighting him, which starts one of the fights with the Neo Ration Safe. Now, Mira Jane, in this fight, explains to Razor what he's been doing to himself, and which is causing him mental pain. Razor realizes that he wasn't being fast, rather he was always running away. While returning to her normal self, Mira Jane says that she has been running away from a certain fear in the past, and speaks more, or that he's been running away from something fearful in his past. And she even compares it to her past, saying like, I always ran away from my past too, essentially signifying the fact that, after she thought Lizana died, I kind of shut down and stopped being a wizard and try to run away from all of that and everything. And Razor essentially starts to realize this, and eventually Mira Jane adds that no one is going to chase him anymore, and it causes him to cry. So essentially, Razor, in order to essentially get faster, he just ran away from his he essentially ran away from his past. He tried to run away from his past and stuff like that. So that was kind of his sacrifice. But at the same time, yes, you have to get over your past, but also confronting your past is also a good thing there. So yeah, it was pretty cool. There now, Gilderts and Loki, they sneak into the Archbishop's quarter. They're confronted by Lapointe, who shows his true colors. And with the help of Byro, Lapointe is taken down. But before he dies, he tells them, well, if you want to stop the Infinity Clock, the one thing you have to do is kill Lucy Heartfilia. Also, we see that Cardinal Lapointe was a doll made by Master Zero's hair, which is starting to get on to catching on to some things there. Now, in order to prevent the Legion platoon from doing that, Samuel already is trying to go kill Lucy. Eventually gets stopped by Happy and Imitation and Lily. But Gilderts fights Byro to stop him. Gilderts eventually defeats Byro. Wendy also tries to save the Archbishop as well with her magic. Urza has her final fight with Cobra, Gray, and Angel. Gray fights Angel again. Gajo fights Midnight, but kind of gets jobbed out pretty easily. Natsu, Coco, and Elfman fight Michelle, who's Imitation, who's really gun-ho at protecting Lucy. Now, in this whole scuffle of the fights going on, Happy comes up with a theory of the fact that maybe we can also save Lucy by defeating the other Ration Safe members, since they're linked to the control of the clock. And that might be the truth. We later find out that is the truth, so Happy's theories come to fruition. Also, Kinana is also left the guild because she's overhearing Cobra really calling out to her, and that's when we kind of get that scene there. Now, Urza starts a fight against Cobra, who's using sound magic. But throughout the battle, Urza keeps telling Cobra how she can hear the voices of her friend, and those are the voices that drives her to go on and continue to fight and also win. But Cobra is like, your words are pathetic and they're stupid, and they essentially go out and fight on these chains and stuff like that. Urza then asks Cobra, like, why does he want to bring despair to people in the same way that he felt while he was in the Tower of Heaven? And he come back to that part of saying he couldn't care less because I have no friends. But at some point in the fight, he hears Kinina calling out to him, and it's enough of a distraction to where Urza uses the hammer to defeat um, Cobra, eventually sending him down where Kinina and him have their embrace there. In a quick second. Also, the archaeologists tell the other fairy tale wizards through Warren, like, hey, if you take down, if you hit the chains that are connected to the ground, you can be able to slow down the clock's, time when when it's absorbing Lucy. Anyways, we cut over to Gray as she's fighting Angel. Gray essentially at one point gets her down, and Angel essentially is asking Gray to kill her with this ice scythe he made, and so that she can fade into the sky like a true angel. But he's like, I'm not going to do that because I'm not like that. So Angel gets pretty pissed off. She summons this what she calls an angel named Ragel with the cost of 100 golden coins. What we see earlier also in this, and she does in the arc. Now, followed by Angel's speech about her dream to become an actual angel, even if it shortens her own life, as in the case of using angel magic. Now, she also explains that the more she uses angel magic, the more she can see the filth in this world that she currently lives. Also, when she uses magic, she gives up a part of her lifespan. So when that when that quote unquote angel is taken down, she literally can die. And here she used 100 part of her lifespan, which essentially she's putting her life on the line. Now, Gray, he's pissed off by what she's saying, and he questions whether or not she's ready to abandon her own life. Now, he's telling her, like, listen, you know your magic is too strong. You can't let your magic control you. And Gray's telling her, like, doesn't this magic, this doesn't look this magic. This doesn't look like an angel. This looks like a demon. This looks like a parasite, a monster. Your magic is feeding off of your life energy. Are you just gonna let this just kill you and let this go? You should want to live and everything. And that's when Angel realizes what obviously Ragel looks like. But she's still in. Holy crap! But she still denies obviously Gray's word. But eventually, the two eventually is getting swallowed by the angel. But then that's when she eventually starts to see Gray's words come into fruition. And then that's when Angel shouts out her will to live. Thanks for Gray. Thanks for Gray taking out obviously Ragel. Also, Dan was in this battle earlier too, but he throws the spear at Angel's chest, around Angel's like chest area, to essentially shorten obviously the one lifespan that was going to kill Angel and save her life and everything and stuff like that, and essentially reduce obviously the power limit and everything. So they defeat Angel, and Angel is obviously saved. She also, and after this, she's like, I'm in defeat, I'm done. Out of all the Arashion Seis members, this was probably my favorite fight, just because it gave me those vibes of a character that just doesn't see any purpose in living. But Gray kind of is the person to be like, listen, yes, maybe life isn't good. Yes, there's a lot of bad people. Life can be shitty. That's facts. But you shouldn't want to die. You shouldn't want to fly up and try to quote unquote become an angel because you're frustrated with life. Like, you should want to live and see through the bad times to get to those good times. I don't know if I'm interpreting that right, but honestly, I remember from my older view, this was one thing I actually did like. This was probably my favorite fight, and even rewatching it, it still hits me kind of hard. It almost makes me tear up, to be honest. And I really do like this whole thing in Angel's character, especially where how they take her character later on and everything. So yeah, I really do. This was probably my favorite fight out of the Seis. It does hit some pretty emotional strings, and also did give me that Robin "I want to live" type of thing when she said "I want to live," and stuff like that. So yeah, now During the fight to save Lucy, Lucy remembers Michelle from her past. But when Midnight says that Lucy will forget everything once she's fused the clock, it upsets Michelle, and she tries to free Lucy. Yeah, she tries to free Lucy, but when Midnight's like, you're just pathetic, he turns her, and we find out that Lucy's true, or not Lucy, Michelle's true form is the form of a doll. I know I didn't speak much about the Natsu versus Imitation fight. But mostly the characters that are involved in the imitation fight are saying, "Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? Isn't Lucy? Don't you care about Lucy and everything?" Even Romeo gets involved in this, saying, "Like you lied to Lucy. Like, don't you love your sister, your big sister, and stuff like that? How can you call yourself her How can you call Lucy your sister if you're just gonna betray your sister like that?" Which again, like I said, is probably one of the last times Romeo ever gets featured in a main important role in that fight. And again, like I said, this is a filler arc makes Romeo probably do the most he's ever done in the entire series, and that's sad. Yeah. So yeah, but when Lucy sees this, that's when Lucy remembers the past. And she remembers the past that Michelle in her past was a doll, and she always played with Michelle. And she also called Michelle back then her little sister and everything. But Lucy stopped playing with her and forcibly forgot her because it reminded her about her mother's death and everything. So it ends up from this fight ends up turning into Natsu versus Midnight. Eventually, it's kind of gets to the point where Natsu gets trapped inside Genesis Zero again from Midnight. And after he breaks out, he defeats Midnight. Now, now at this point in time, Lucy's already fused with the Infinity Clock, even after they defeated everybody to break the link. And that's when Warren telepathically communicates to everybody, stating that Lucy's still not completely gone, and that Jean-Luc and the others of the guild have found out a way to bring her back and get her back to her regular body. And she says if Lucy can undo all the anti-link spells cast on the celestial spirit mages who are protecting the clock, the pieces of the clock will once again break apart and scatter around the world as they once were before. Lucy ends up doing that, and she manages to be free. You have this pretty emotional, I guess, Nalu moment where Nasu literally catches her and stuff like that, and everything. The celestial spirit wizards that were affected with the anti-link spells, they come back to normal, and they're alive again. The only thing is, just like Kajita, they don't have any access to their magic power no more and everything. And at this same point in time, Cobra also meets up with Kinana, and eventually that's when the two realize, Cobra definitely realizes that Kinana is Cobelius. So we find out that Cobelius is Kinana in human form. And essentially you see Lahar and Doranbolt show up, and they're taking Cobra in custody. And they ask, is Kinana, an acquaintance of his? And that's when Cobra, in order to protect, obviously, Kinana, he says, no, I don't know anything about her. She's just some girl that says she knows me, but I don't even know anything about her. So he gets taken away to prison and stuff like that. But it's already implied that the fact that Kinana and Cobra both know that it's each other's, that they're each other, the people that are calling out to each other, which starts their relationship, their romantic relationship, which is kind of weird because it's like Cobra falls for his snake partner, but at the same time, his snake partner is a human girl. So okay, yeah, that makes sense. But okay, yeah. Anyways, what happens in the epilogue of the arc? Lucy reminisces over the events surrounding the clock, and she returns to her father's mansion and fixes the old, tattered painting that we see earlier in the arc. She found that at the start of her journey, smiling as she spots the doll of imitation on her lap. She also takes the doll. She also took the doll form of imitation back, or she takes Michelle's doll back to her apartment and just kind of sits her on her desk. It's just something to remember by, alongside the drafts for the book about the clock and the adventure she had looking for her father's memento. Within the my goodness, within the Zentopia church, the archbishop, after recovering, gives a speech saying that most of the people who are associated with the church must repent for their sins and begin their lives renewed. The Legion platoon are officially apologize to Fairy Tale for their past actions and what they do. Eventually, them and Fairy Tale celebrate and they have a nice little party. Now, Lahar is informed that the Celestial Spirit Mages descended from Will Neville's disciples have awakened and the spell caused by their anti-link, are gone, and their powers are gone, like I said earlier. He informs Doranbolt of the news and is relieved that Doranbolt also expresses happiness at the fact that Fairy Tale had survived the events of the Infinity Clock. At sunset, Byro reveals that the Legion Corps have been assigned a new assignment by the Archbishop to steal all the remaining parts of the Infinity Clock, which will also require an immense amount of time in order to complete it. Fairy Tale and the Legion platoon bid their final farewells, and that's where the arc ends. And yeah, that's it. So again, my overview of this arc, I thought this arc, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I thought it was pretty solid. It's not by any means good or great, and it's not by no means bad. I think it's kind of a middle tier type of arc. It's solid for what it was. The plot, I think, is actually a pretty decent plot with all the plot twists that happens, because it's just, you think our characters are doing something good, but then they end up not doing something good, and they find out, oh, we've just been playing into the hands of the main antagonist of the group. The same with the Legion platoon, and stuff like that. Now, I won't lie, the arc was a little slow at the start. It was slow, but by the time, you get the introduction of the Neo-Rathian States, that's when the story really picks up and things goes haywire. Another thing I kind of didn't like was the fact that it kind of made the Legion platoon members completely pointless, with the exception of Byro. And what I mean is, go over this. Dan, nothing more than just a dude who is just following the hot chicks, which is really Angel and Lucy. Nothing much there, even though he's a pretty chivalrous guy. Coco. Literally the same exact Coco storyline. They pulled from Daedalus and put it in Earthland. So, doesn't mean much, really, in the grand scheme of things. Hughes. Yeah, she had some focus, really near the back half of the arc with Gutman and everything, but not really much of focus. Sugar Boy, good God. Sugar Boy was nothing. He appears in the first part of this arc, and then there's nothing. Like, he appears in the Urza versus Cobra fight, and Cobra literally jobs him out. Sugar Boy honestly is done worse in this alliteration of his character than it was in Daedalus. Hold on a quick second. Okay, and then back to what I was saying. So Sugar Boy was completely pointless. Byro, out of all the Legion platoon members, was probably the only Legion platoon member I actually legit liked from beginning to end. Because the thing about Byro was he was so much more better than his Daedalus counterpart. Like, his Daedalus counterpart was just some conniving old dude. But here they actually give him full out character development throughout this arc, which I thought they were going to give the other Legion platoon members. I forgot to mention Samuel. I'll speak about Samuel after. And I think I'm on the fence about Samuel. I like him, but the same case, I don't like him. But I'm kind of leaning more to the fact that I do like him. He's kind of in the same shoes as Byro with his character, so I guess I'm just going to speak for the both of them on why I like them both. And the one thing I do like about Byro and Samuel is the fact that, they were very conflicted throughout this entire arc, especially with all the revelations that we're having. And the thing I like about it is, they knew what they were doing was wrong, because they know, something's up. It just doesn't feel right. But, they still stuck, and you could see the conflict. They know they didn't want to do it, but they ended up doing it regardless, even if it was not the right thing to do. And by the end of the arc, they realized, wow, we did something completely wrong and stuff like that. And they move on. Honestly, I like those characters. They're probably the two best characters. Samuel and Byro are probably the two best characters of the Legion platoon. Byro being the best Legion platoon character to stand out, especially compared to its Edalus counterpart. I thought with the Edalus counterparts, they want to give them more development, more character development, more understanding, make them a bigger part of it. Yes, they had a big part somewhat, but when you introduce the Arashi and Sace in the arc, they were kind of just there, to be honest. And after that, nothing much happened with them. They just show up and then they're kind of just there to get in the way. Now, as for the next group character, which is the Neo Ration Sace. Again, like I started the video off, I like the Neo Ration Sace more in this arc than I do in their original arc. And I like the standpoint of the fact that each one of them gave up something from their life to get this main power, like Cobra, to get this stronger power, gave up his eye. Angel was willing to give up her life force to get greater power, and stuff like that. Racer tried to run away from his past to get greater power. Aragorn, and to get stronger, was willing to forget his past. I like the fact that the Arashi and Sace members were much more better in this than the representative arcs. Again, not to say that they weren't bad, but it's like you go to Angel from the original Arashi, you go from Angel to the Arashi and Sace arc to this Angel in this arc, and 10 out of 10 times, you're taking the one from the filler arc over the base one because she was just there and she's just a way to get in Lucy's way. Racer, just a character to get in Lucy's way. And you have these hard-hitting moments for these guys, which adds to their development and stuff like that, and builds on it. And honestly, I like how they were handled here. They were handled superiorly better in this arc than they were in their own canonical arc, literally. And honestly, it makes it when they eventually turn to good guys later on in the series. When you see this arc, you make sense to why they would turn into good guys and stuff like that after this arc, which makes it wish that this arc was canonically in the timeline, but like I said, it's up to what you want to interpret. If you want to feel like this is canon, then go ahead. So yeah, but I really enjoyed the Arashi and Sace in this. My favorite character to come out of the Arashi and Sace in this alliteration of them was, like I said earlier, the person of my favorite battle of this whole Arashi and Sace stuff, and that was Angel. I loved Angel's character in this arc compared to her bland character in the first one. Cobra came out probably being my favorite one. In the first one, he's still up there, but Angel definitely takes the cake for my favorite Arashi and Sace member. They really give her good development in that fight with Gray. So yeah, and then obviously the last character I want to talk about is Michelle. Michelle, I thought as a character, I thought it was fairly good. I thought it was a fairly good character. She had the emotional attachment to Lucy, and when you get the whole plot twist with her turning bad, despite how they handled it, it was still hard hitting. And then the fact that after she realizes, oh shit, I did all this shit wrong. I'm doing all this shit wrong. I just want to be with Lucy. It hits you when you get revealed that she was a doll this entire time and stuff like that. And she essentially felt like she was forgotten by Lucy and felt alone and abandoned. And I really do like that. Even it makes it seem like, well, guess what? Dolls have life too. And I honestly like Michelle's character. It was very emotional when she essentially died. You can say she died. She's not dead, but she essentially died when she got turned back to a doll. Her personality died, I guess you can say. So, yeah. But other than that, that's kind of it. I for the most part, like I said, compared to my first watch of this arc, I really much enjoyed my second watch of this arc. And I remember shitting on this arc completely. But here, the Starry Sky arc, it isn't bad. It really isn't. It's honestly a solid. I'd give it a B to B minus. it's a fairly decent storytelling of a fairy tale arc that essentially you can say with a matter of adjust for the time being until you get later on to the series, kind of closes off the Lucy family dynamic, mostly Lucy's family dynamic with her father. We see Lucy's family dynamic with her mother get brought up later in future arcs and everything. Yeah. But honestly, like I said, enjoy this arc much more than I did my first rewatching. That's the good thing about rewatching a series and reviewing it. You get new takes and new analyses and be like, you know what, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Typically, it takes second watches or third watches to see it. Again, this isn't an arc that I want to go back and watch over and over and over again. This is an arc where I check over. Would this be an arc where I'd be like, you know what, let me just get some fairy tale and maybe just not do this arc? Yeah, I'd probably be like, you know what, I can watch a few episodes. It's kind of not it's not a long arc. It's kind of like, you know, a middle length arc. It isn't that long. Like it goes from episodes 125 to episode 150. It's not that long, but it's not short either. So yeah. But I enjoyed this arc. I'll probably at the end of my arc reviews will do a whole ranking or ranking of my favorite arcs to least favorite arcs. So yeah, but next time on the fairy tale arc reviews, I'm going to be discussing the very well let's just say controversial Grand Magic Games arc in terms of how people feel about it. And I know this is a very controversial arc. You know, that Sting moment, essentially from what I always heard is Grand Magic Games arc is where you either stick with fairy tale or you just drop fairy tale when you get to a special scene in the fairy tale. And I just referenced that moment. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about next week on next Monday, the Grand Magic Games arc. So I'm going to get to watching that because the Grand Magic Game arc, and especially from this point on, starts the arc of the longest arcs of fairy tale and stuff like that. So yeah. Now, quick thing for the Grand Magic Games arc, I think I mentioned it in my Tenro Island video at the end of that, but for the Grand Magic Games arc, I will be doing a 2-part arc review for that arc alone because that arc is so damn long. It's literally split up into almost two different places. Mostly because they have a whole animation change midway through the arc, which I think makes it good. So next week, I'll be going up from the start of the Grand Magic Games arc to the ending battle with Sting, Natsu, Rogue, and Gajeel. That's when we're going to stop. That's going to be all of part 1. Part 2 of the Grand Magic Games will cover everything from that point on to the end of the arc. And then we'll get on to the next arc when we get on to the next arc. So look forward to the Grand Magic Games. The Grand Magic Games, in my grand scheme of thing, is definitely my second favorite arc of the series, despite how people feel about it, especially about that one moment in that arc. And you'll hear my thoughts whenever we get to that, which will be in 2 weeks from now. But yeah, can't wait to talk Grand Magic Games. I don't have to get into watching it because it's a long arc and stuff like that. But other than that, I'm going to get out of here, guys. If you guys like the video, leave a like. Put in the comment section your thoughts on the Key of the Starry Sky arc. Do you like the fact of this arc, even though it's anime-only filler? Or do you not like it? So, yeah. So hit that subscribe button if you want to get more fairy tale arc reviews. And yeah, if you do hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the notification bell icon, and so you make sure you're up to date with whatever I upload to the channel. So yeah, we have officially hit the halfway point of the fairy tale story, and yeah. So till then, guys, I'll catch you guys next Monday, at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern, or not 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone, Pacific Standard Time Zone, 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time Zone for Grand Magic Games Part 1. Till then, guys, have a great rest of your day or night. I'm just going to this video. Peace.